what's the compelling truth of your brand? Okay, those two words are chosen very carefully. I didn't coin them. Scott Lerman, a former boss of mine, did, and I've retained it ever since because I think that's ultimately what we're all after. Those two words are chosen very carefully. If what you're saying isn't compelling to your audience, you're done. They aren't going to listen. But it's also done if they don't believe it. Okay, so you can go into that thing and you can talk about something. I'm from so-and-so, and wow, let me tell you about our brand. The first thing you say is you got a competitor who's twice as good as you are. The person's looking down and say, who'd you say you're with? Or if that's the best you've got, we can cut this short because you're not even good at it. So there's got to be credibility there as well. And the third side of that, as I said earlier, was it's got to be true too. From the research that I've done over the years, I've found that the maximum shelf life of smoke and mirrors is 18 months. That you can lie to people, but if you don't make it true within 18 months, that house of cards is done. It's down. Okay, so let's look at the whole life cycle of the customer life cycle. It's not rocket science. They got to know, they got to have heard of your brand. They've got to know what you do. It's got to meet their needs. And to ultimately win the business, if you will, to get them to behave in whatever way you want, it's got to meet their needs better than any other brand they're familiar with. Okay, so that, if you make it through all four of those gates, you've got yourself a customer. You've got yourself an investor. You've got yourself an employee. Whatever you're trying to use the brand to do, you just got one. The retention side's a little different. The brand at that point is no longer about what it promises you, it's what it actually delivers. It's actually the experience. So the whole retention side moves into the whole customer experience, customer satisfaction, all of that side of stuff. Where the brand really comes into play is once somebody knows that you do what they want done, now they're going to figure out, okay, so what is that thing about? So it's got to be about consideration and choice. And I know we have a lot of B2C people here. We have maybe a couple of B2B, and there always used to be at least an argument about, well, is B2B buying like B2C or is it different? I'm of the school that's the same, that everybody's a consumer. It may be more complex, but it's the same thing. And the other big debate, well, is it rational or is it emotional? And maybe some products are emotional buys and others are rational buys. I argue it's both. I argue that consideration, this gate, is a very rational process. We know we're supposed to think. So we go and we do a lot of desk research, we check websites, if we're buying a car, we'll look in some of the books that rate, go to Edmunds.com or Kelly's Blue Book and some of those things. But that narrows it down. I mean, if you're buying a car, how many of you go to 20 car dealerships? Unless you're really strange, you don't. Okay, but you might start by looking into 20 different nameplates. Just when you first start your search, you probably go to 3 dealerships. And so I think that was a very rational process. But when you get to that last part, you now know that any of those brands in your short list will do the job. So what you've done is you've given yourself permission to now go completely emotional, because there's no wrong answer at that point. So when you buy the car, it's no longer about, well, what's the gas mileage, how good are the brakes? It's about how am I going to look in that thing, right? Am I going to be a Babe magnet if I drive that car? Is that what they call it? It was so long ago. Okay. The good old days. Okay, so let's go and look a little further. So what should be the center of gravity? What should be compelling about your brand? If you try to be all things to all people, it will end up being nothing to anyone. So you've got to have a center of gravity. So what's the right center of gravity? For most brands, and I will leave out the not-for-profit, the donation side of things. There's another layer involved in that that's very emotional. But for most brands, centers of gravity tend to fall somewhere around that. It could be around your infrastructure. Visa is a good example. They compete against American Express by anywhere you want to be. That's where we are. You don't have to worry about it. Whereas American Express is more about membership, has its privileges. It's more about some of these things down in here. It could be about your products. Okay, an example we use, and maybe we shouldn't, with Disney. Okay, is Disney about theme parks and movies and all of that, or is it about magic? Is it about something that goes beyond just the things that you do. I would argue that Disney does not belong here, that it's much more about down in this type of an area, and clearly it's in the emotional area. Okay, it could be about the way you do things. Look what Netflix did to Blockbuster. Who? I mean, they just blew them away. They didn't deliver something different. They delivered it differently. And as a result, they just completely blew them away. People in skills, McKinsey in the management consulting area, Goldman Sachs in the financial services area. Somehow there's this belief that they just have better people. Now, admittedly, their business, probably like your own, like ours, people go from one competitor to another in our business. I assume it's the same in your business. But somehow when you go to McKinsey or you go to Goldman, you show up for the first day of that job and holy cow, my IQ has just gone up 20 points. And then when you leave, I'm sorry, but you can't take that with you. It's like, okay, I'm stupid again. But there's just this belief that the people that are working there are somehow smarter, better, more able. That's what they protect voraciously with their brand. Well, Goldman kind of slipped up a little bit there recently, but they're trying to get that back. Mission and purpose, the body shop, it's not about what they make, it's about the fair trade rules, and in fact it's more about their principles in terms of why you would probably buy from them. Emotional connection and projection. Emotional connection talks about how I feel when I come in contact with your brand. How does your brand make me feel? The emotional projection is, what does it say to others if you know that I use your brand? So the Rolex watch is heavily around the emotional projection. BMW is probably the strongest brand there ever was, because literally, you talk about brand, people brand their bodies with that. I mean, that is a brand, literally. But you know, it doesn't mean that. I mean, you also will have things up here in terms of what are they about. But that's something you certainly want to get for that last choice if you want to have some sort of emotional tie to people. And lastly, personality. All of these companies are going to have personality unless your personality is classic, like absence of. Okay, so I mean, Affleck. I mean, can you imagine Affleck having a personality before they got that duck? I mean, okay, we're in disability insurance. Okay, you guys, do you do stand-up comic routines?